First off, I'm very curious about working on a movie of this size with a director who is making his very first feature. Were you concerned about that at all, and how did David surprise you?
You know, I was lucky. You were just mentioning when we met in Sundance, I had already worked with first-time directors, and I worked with a lot of female first-time directors, and so I kind of had an experience of working with first-time directors, and it's a different, obviously, dynamic, but David felt like so well, experienced. And I mean, obviously he works closely with Tim Miller and has Blur Films with him, and he's no stranger to this. He's been doing stuff really embedded in the industry. He's been building trailers and has a sense of direction. So not only that, he had such a clarity on his vision, which I thought was really impressive for just in general, not for a first-time director, but just for a person. He just had a clarity and an idea, and he was really invested on like making the characters real and emotional and not just like one-layered. Especially cared about the female character, which I loved and is rare, because it didn't feel like he didn't want her to be either a damsel in distress or just a tough chick. He wanted to really kind of blend these two things together, and I was sold immediately after my first meeting, and it was just from there, like, that never disappointed.
I'm glad you brought that up about your character, because I was reading the press notes, and I was surprised that they described the relationship between Katy and Ray as just a romance. It almost feels like unfair to boil it down to that specific descriptor. So in your own words, can you explain what's going on between the two of them?
Yeah, I think it's more of a platonic love, which I think it's strong, because that was one of the things that kind of brought me into this film, which was like, oh, I don't have to be anyone's love interest. This is amazing. You know, and it is, I do believe in love relationship. That's important in films, just because it creates, we connect with love, we create with emotions, and I think it is important. We do things based on love. But the greatest thing about this was just, it wasn't like a random version of it. It was sort of like these two people that feel unseen and kind of see each other in a different way, but it's kind of a Romeo and Juliet situation where she can't help him and vice versa. And I loved that she was just an integral part of the story, in the sense of she's the heart of the story. She is emotional, she is real, she doesn't have an agenda, which is rare also in action films for female. Like, I had never had the chance to be my independent version of itself. Like, it's always like attached to some version of a male, and she is a different thing in this film. So I felt really strong, and the fact that she stands up for what she believes, and it's an ode to real female soldiers, because they are going out there, and she is a female soldier, and I had to do it right towards them.
Yeah, it comes through very, very well. I was very impressed by that element. Also, I wanted to ask about the breathing, because I go to the gym a lot, and one of the worst things that I do at the gym is I don't breathe properly. So did playing this particular role make you really focus on that to the point that you've taken it with you?
Yes, it was, and I, you know, throughout we did various iterations of the story, because for a long time, you know, my breathing was crucial, because I thought, you know, that really gives away. For me, it was important to give away with the breathing. When she was lying, she couldn't lie, so the breathing is kind of what gave her away. And it was irregular, and you feel it, like, she does certain breaths that you're like, oh, that's odd. She's breathing abnormally here and there. And then when you kind of come back, you're like, oh, she was not being able to lie. And so that was super important. And obviously, the tone of my voice is so deep, because it has to match kind of the problem with the lungs, that it was tricky, because I didn't want to sound flat, but also wanted to keep that range of her voice. So it was tricky. I really went, these are all subtle things, obviously. They're not big maybe for some people, but for me it was challenging. And obviously the choking scene was really hard, because I had to choke, and so we did that a lot of times, and that was, it really got me to the emotion too, because that's a scary feeling.
It was worth thinking about all the attention to detail here, because it played very well.
I appreciate that.